It was one of those quiet Thursday nights where nothing special was supposed to happen. He sat at his desk typing away on his laptop, finishing up some work that had been piling up all week. The apartment was silent except for the soft clicking of his keyboard and the occasional sound of cars passing by outside. His roommate had left that morning for a weekend trip back home, which meant he had the whole place to himself. Or at least that's what he thought. Around 11 at night, he heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the front door lock. He paused his typing and listened. The door opened and closed softly. Footsteps moved through the hallway. He figured his roommate must have come back early. Maybe the trip got canceled or something came up. He didn't think much of it and went back to his work. The apartment fell quiet again. He could hear water running through the pipes. Someone was taking a shower. He shook his head and smiled a bit. His roommate always took late-night showers after long drives. Everything seemed normal. Just another regular night. About 20 minutes passed. He was deep into reading an article on his screen when he heard his bedroom door handle turn. The door pushed open slowly. He looked up, ready to ask his roommate about the trip. But it wasn't his roommate standing there. A young woman stood frozen in his doorway. She was wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping wet, little drops of water falling onto the hardwood floor. Her eyes went wide the moment she saw him sitting there. Her face turned bright red within seconds. They both just stared at each other, neither one moving, neither one saying a word. His mind went completely blank. He couldn't process what was happening. Who was this person? Why was she in his apartment? How did she get in? 1,000 questions flooded his brain all at once, but his mouth wouldn't form any words. She took a small step backward, clutching the towel tighter around herself. Her mouth opened like she was about to say something, but nothing came out. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever, but was probably only 5 or 6 seconds. Finally, she managed to speak. Her voice came out shaky and quiet. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I didn't know anyone was here." He blinked a few times, trying to make sense of the situation. Then something clicked in his memory. He recognized her face. She was his roommate's younger sister. He'd met her once before at a family cookout several months back. They'd barely talked that day, just a quick introduction and some polite small talk by the grill. But he definitely remembered her face. You're his sister, right?" He finally managed to say, his voice sounding strange even to his own ears. She nodded quickly, still looking absolutely mortified. "Yes, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He gave me his spare key. He said I could stay here this weekend. I'm looking at apartments in the area and he offered his room while he was gone." The words tumbled out of her mouth fast, like she was desperate to explain herself. He sat there trying to piece everything together. His roommate hadn't mentioned anything about this. Not a single word. No text message, no note, nothing. Just complete radio silence about the fact that his sister would be staying over. "He didn't tell me," he said, more to himself than to her. Her expression shifted from embarrassment to confusion, then to frustration. "What, he didn't tell you?" She closed her eyes and let out a long breath. "Of course he didn't. That's so typical of him. I swear he never communicates anything properly." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Neither of them knew quite what to do or say next. She stood there dripping water on his floor, wrapped in a towel, looking like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. He sat at his desk in his old t-shirt and sweatpants, feeling equally uncomfortable. I should go get dressed," she said, pointing vaguely toward his roommate's room down the hall. "I am really sorry about this. This is so embarrassing." "It's okay," he said, though his voice didn't sound very convincing. "It's not your fault. He should have told me." She nodded and quickly disappeared down the hallway. He heard a door close. He sat there for a moment, staring at the spot where she'd been standing, wondering if that had actually just happened or if he'd somehow fallen asleep at his desk and was having the weirdest dream of his life, but the small puddle of water on his floor confirmed it was very real. He rubbed his face with both hands and let out a long sigh. What was he supposed to do now? His roommate's sister was staying in the next room for the entire weekend, and they'd just had possibly the most awkward first reintroduction two people could have. He grabbed his phone and opened his messages, finding his roommate's name. He typed out a quick message. "Hey, would have been nice to know your sister was staying over this weekend. Just had a very awkward encounter. He hit send and put the phone down. No response came immediately, which wasn't surprising. His roommate was probably already asleep at his parents' house. About 10 minutes later, he heard a soft knock on his door. He got up and opened it. She stood there now, fully dressed in jeans and a sweater, her wet hair pulled back into a ponytail. She looked calmer but still visibly uncomfortable. "Hey," she said quietly, "can we maybe talk for a minute? I feel terrible about this whole thing." He stepped aside and gestured toward the living room. "Sure. Yeah, let's talk." They walked into the living room together, the awkwardness hanging between them like a heavy fog. She sat down on one end of the couch and he sat on the other end, leaving a respectful distance between them. This was going to be a long weekend. They sat there in silence for a moment, both trying to figure out how to move past what had just happened. The living room felt bigger than usual, the space between them on the couch somehow both too much and not enough at the same time. She broke the silence first. "So this is officially the most embarrassing moment of my entire life," she said, letting out a nervous laugh. "I actually want to disappear right now." He couldn't help but smile a little. "Yeah, it's definitely up there on the awkward scale. But honestly, it's not your fault. Your brother should have told both of us what was going on." She shook her head, looking frustrated. "He's always been like this. Terrible at communication. Last year, he forgot to tell our parents he was bringing friends home for Thanksgiving. My mom had to rush out and buy extra food an hour before dinner." She paused, then looked at him directly. "But still, I should have texted or called before just showing up and making myself at home. I just assumed he'd told you." "Well, assumptions are great until they're not," he said, trying to lighten the mood a bit. She smiled at that, a real smile this time, not the awkward grimace from before. "Right? I literally assumed the entire apartment was empty. I took my time in the shower, singing and everything. Then I walked out thinking I'd just get dressed in peace." She covered her face with her hands. "I still can't believe that actually happened." He got up from the couch. "You know what? Let me make some tea or coffee or something. We're going to be here all weekend, and we can't spend the next 3 days being weird around each other." "Tea sounds good," she said, seeming grateful for the distraction. "Thank you." He went to the small kitchen and filled the kettle with water, setting it on the stove. She followed him and leaned against the doorframe, watching as he pulled out 2 mugs from the cabinet. "So, your brother mentioned you're moving to the city?" he asked, trying to steer the conversation toward normal territory. Her face brightened a bit. "Yeah, finally. I've been planning this for almost a year now. Got a job offer last month, and I've been looking at apartments all week. That's why I'm here, actually. I have 3 viewings scheduled for tomorrow." "That's exciting," he said, dropping tea bags into both mugs. "What kind of work do you do?" "Graphic design. Mostly freelance stuff right now. But the new job is with an actual company. Steady paycheck, benefits, all that adult stuff." She walked over to the small kitchen table and sat down. "What about you? Your brother said you're in grad school?" "Yeah, 2nd year. Research mostly. It's interesting, but also kind of draining sometimes." The kettle started whistling and he poured the hot water into the mugs. "How do you take your tea?" "Just plain is fine. I'm not fancy." He brought both mugs over to the table and sat down across from her. The steam rose between them, creating little clouds in the air. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug and took a small sip. "This is nice," she said quietly. "Better than hiding in separate rooms all weekend pretending the other person doesn't exist." "Way better than that," he agreed. They talked for a while about simple things. She told him about the apartments she'd be looking at tomorrow, describing what she was hoping to find. He told her about the neighborhood, which coffee shops were good, which grocery store had the best prices, which streets got too loud on weekend nights. The conversation started feeling less forced, more natural. The awkwardness from earlier began to fade into the background. "Can I ask you something?" she said, setting her mug down. "Are you actually okay with me staying here? Because if it's weird or uncomfortable, I can find a hotel. I don't want to make this your problem." He thought about it for a second. "Honestly? The initial shock was intense, not going to lie. But now that we're talking and everything's out in the open, it's fine. Your brother's room is just sitting there empty anyway. Might as well use it." She looked relieved. "Okay, good. I really appreciate that. And I promise I'll stay out of your way. You won't even know I'm here." "It's a small apartment," he said with a slight smile. "I think we'll know each other is here. But that's okay." She laughed at that, a genuine sound that made the whole situation feel less strange. Fair point. They kept talking as they finished their tea. Somehow the conversation shifted to movies. She mentioned loving old films, the kind from the 70s and 80s that most people their age hadn't even heard of. His eyes lit up when she said that. Wait, seriously? I thought I was the only person under 30 who actually watches those, he said, leaning forward a bit. No way. I grew up watching them with my grandfather. He had this huge collection of old DVDs and VHS tapes. We'd spend entire weekends just going through them. Her whole energy changed when she talked about this. Becoming more animated and excited, they started listing off titles, finding out they'd both seen obscure movies that most people had never heard of. They debated about which decade had the best cinematography, which directors were underrated, which actors deserved more recognition. Time passed without either of them noticing. The awkwardness that had filled the apartment earlier was completely gone now, replaced by the easy flow of two people who'd discovered unexpected common ground. She glanced at her phone and her eyes widened. Oh wow, it's almost midnight. I didn't realize we'd been talking this long. He looked at the clock on the wall, surprised. Yeah, time went by fast. She stood up and grabbed both their empty mugs, taking them to the sink. I should probably get some sleep. I've got those apartment viewings pretty early tomorrow. She turned to face him. Thank you for being cool about all this. And for the tea. And for not making this weekend impossibly weird. No problem, he said, standing up as well. Good luck with the apartment hunt tomorrow. She started walking toward the hallway, then stopped and turned back. You know what? At least we got the most awkward moment out of the way first. Everything from here can only be better, right? He laughed. That's one way to look at it. Good night, she said with a small wave. Good night. He watched her disappear down the hallway, heard the guest room door close softly. He stood there in the kitchen for a moment, thinking about how strange the evening had been. How it had started with complete shock and confusion, and somehow ended with an actual decent conversation. He cleaned up the kitchen, turned off the lights, and headed to his own room. As he got ready for bed, he couldn't help but think that maybe this weekend wouldn't be as awkward as he'd feared. Maybe it might even turn out okay. Sunday morning arrived too quickly. He woke up knowing she'd be leaving later that day, heading back to her old city to pack up her life and prepare for the big move. The apartment would go back to being quiet again. Just him and his work and the usual routine. He found her in the kitchen again, but this time she wasn't rushing around. She was just sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, staring out the window with a distant look on her face. Morning, he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned and gave him a small smile. Morning. Made more coffee. I'm going to miss this kitchen when I'm back in my cramped little apartment. He poured himself a cup and sat down across from her. When are you heading out? Not until this afternoon. My train's at 4. She wrapped both hands around her mug. I was thinking about the second apartment. I'm going to call the landlord tomorrow and put in an application. That's great. It was definitely the best option. Yeah. She nodded but didn't seem as excited as she should have been about finally finding a place. What's wrong? He asked. She was quiet for a moment, then let out a long breath. I have to go back and have some difficult conversations. About the move. About everything. I've been avoiding thinking about it all weekend, but reality hits the moment I get on that train. He understood without her having to explain more. The boyfriend. The relationship that was pulling apart at the seams. The guilt and pressure she'd mentioned yesterday in the park. Do you know what you're going to say? He asked carefully. Not really. I just know I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. She looked at him directly. This weekend helped me realize something. I've been so focused on not hurting other people that I forgot I'm allowed to want things too. I'm allowed to choose myself. You are, he said quietly. They sat there in comfortable silence, drinking their coffee as morning light filled the kitchen. Neither of them seemed to want to rush the moment. Later that day, they took one more walk around the neighborhood. She wanted to see everything one more time, to cement the images in her mind for when she came back. They walked slowly, stopping to look at little details they'd missed before. A bookstore with a cat sleeping in the window, a community garden tucked between two buildings, a cafe that had live music on weekends. I'm going to miss this, she said suddenly. Miss what? You'll be living here soon. No, I mean these last 3 days. Just talking and walking around and not overthinking everything. She kicked a small stone along the sidewalk. Real life is going to feel different. Once I'm actually moved in and working and dealing with all the regular stress of being an adult, maybe, but maybe it doesn't have to be that different. She looked at him with a curious expression, but didn't say anything. When they got back to the apartment, she started gathering her things. She hadn't brought much, just a small bag, but she moved slowly like she was trying to make the time last longer. He helped her check that she hadn't forgotten anything. They did one last sweep of the guest room together. All clear, she said, looking around the empty room one more time. They walked to the front door. She set her bag down and turned to face him. "Thank you," she said, "for everything this weekend. For being understanding about the whole awkward situation. For showing me around. For listening when I needed to talk. You made this so much easier than it could have been. You don't have to thank me. I'm glad you were here." There was a moment where they just stood there looking at each other. The air between them felt different somehow. Heavier. Like there were things being said without any words being spoken. She stepped forward and hugged him. It was brief but genuine. When she pulled back, her eyes were a little brighter than before. "I'll see you soon," she said, picking up her bag. "Yeah. Let me know when you get back safely." She nodded and opened the door. Then she paused and looked back at him one more time. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure. If things were different. If I wasn't dealing with all this complicated stuff in my life right now." "Would you?" She trailed off, seeming to lose her courage. His heart was beating faster, but he kept his voice steady. "Would I what?" She shook her head and gave a sad little smile. "Never mind. Bad timing for that question. I should go." She left before he could respond. He stood in the doorway watching her walk down the hall toward the elevator. She didn't look back. When she was gone, the apartment felt emptier than it had before she'd arrived. He cleaned up the kitchen, changed the sheets in the guest room, tried to get back to his normal routine. But everything felt slightly off now. His roommate came back that evening, completely oblivious to everything that had happened. "How was your weekend?" his roommate asked, dropping his bag in the hallway. "Interesting," he said. "Your sister stayed here." His roommate's face went blank. "Oh no. Please tell me you're joking. You forgot to mention it to both of us. I completely forgot. Like it just vanished from my brain." His roommate looked genuinely guilty. "Was it terrible? Was she upset?" "Are you upset?" "It was fine. We worked it out." "Really? That's good. She's cool once you get to know her." His roommate headed to his room. "Thanks for being understanding about my terrible communication skills." Over the next few weeks, he and she kept in touch through texts. Nothing too serious, just small updates about her day and his day. She told him about how she'd finally had the conversation with her boyfriend. How they'd broken up, how it was painful, but also felt like relief. He wanted to say more than what he could type in a text message. He wanted to tell her that he hadn't stopped thinking about that moment at the door, about the question she'd almost asked but didn't. But he also knew she needed time, space to figure out her own life without someone else immediately stepping in. She sent him a message 3 weeks later. "Got the apartment. Moving in next weekend. Thought you should know." He stared at his phone for a long time before responding. "That's great, congratulations. Thanks. It's scary, but I think it's right." He typed and deleted several different responses before finally sending, "You'll do great. You're braver than you think." "I hope so," she wrote back. Another week passed, then another. He kept expecting to hear from her, but the messages became less frequent. He understood. She was busy with the move, settling into her new job, building a new life. He told himself that was normal and healthy. But late at night, when he couldn't sleep, he'd think about that weekend. About the conversations in the kitchen and the walk through the park and the way she'd looked at him before she left. His roommate noticed he was distracted. "You okay?" his roommate asked one evening. "Yeah, fine. Just tired." His roommate gave him a knowing look. "This wouldn't have anything to do with my sister, would it?" He didn't answer right away. "Look," his roommate continued, "I'm not blind. She's been asking about you, and you've been weird ever since that weekend. So either deal with whatever's going on between you two or let it go. But stop being miserable about it. It's complicated. Everything's complicated. That's life. The question is whether it's worth dealing with the complication or not." That night he lay in bed thinking about what his roommate had said. About whether some things were worth the risk of complication. about whether timing was ever really perfect or if you just had to take chances when they appeared. He picked up his phone and started typing a message. Then deleted it. Then typed another one. Then deleted that too. Finally, he just wrote, "Hey, want to grab coffee sometime?" Her response came 20 minutes later. "I'd like that." His heart did something strange in his chest. Something that felt like hope mixed with nervousness mixed with possibility. "When are you free?" he typed. "How about this weekend?" "This weekend works." He put his phone down and stared at the ceiling, a small smile on his face. Maybe timing didn't have to be perfect. Maybe it just had to be honest.